June 18, 1945. Aishima Airfield, Okinawa. The mechanic from Pittsburgh watched the new fighter roll off the transport ship and felt his stomach sink. He had worked on airplanes since before the war, trainers, bombers, fighters, but he had never seen anything like this. The aircraft was enormous. Fully loaded, the P-47N Thunderbolt weighed over 20,000 pounds. It sat on the tarmac like a slab of iron with wings, its fuselage thick and blunt, its massive Pratt & Whitney R-2800 engine dominating the nose. The propeller alone was taller than some of the men standing around it. "Looks like it eats other fighters for breakfast," the mechanic muttered. Captain Roy Anderson from Texas stood beside him, arms crossed, studying the machine with open suspicion. Anderson had spent the last 8 months flying P-51 Mustangs, fast, graceful aircraft that responded like thoroughbreds. This thing looked like a bulldozer that had somehow learned to fly. The pilots already had a nickname for it, the Jug, and not as a compliment. Japanese airfields lay barely 20 miles north. Anderson imagined Zero pilots reading intelligence reports about this new American fighter. Heavy, slow to climb, incapable of turning with their nimble aircraft. Weight was death in a dogfight. Everyone knew that. A Zero weighed barely 6,000 pounds. This thing weighed 3 times that. Anderson walked slowly around the aircraft, running his hand along the thick aluminum skin. It felt more like armor than airframe. He tapped it with his knuckles. Solid. The engine alone weighed over 2,000 pounds, an 18-cylinder radial producing nearly 2,800 horsepower. Enough power to drag the plane, and the pilot, straight into the sky whether they liked it or not. Then Anderson saw the wings. 8 machine guns. 4 in each wing. 50 caliber M2 Brownings. Each gun carried over 400 rounds. Total ammunition load, 3,400 rounds. A Mustang carried just over half that. A Zero carried even less. "Well," Anderson said quietly, "at least we won't run out of bullets." The squadron spent 3 days learning the aircraft. The instructor, a young lieutenant who had flown the P-47N across the Pacific island by island, talked about it with the pride of a man defending his first car. "She's not pretty," he said, patting the fuselage, "but she'll bring you home." The Thunderbolt could fly over 700 miles on internal fuel alone. With drop tanks, it could escort bombers all the way to Japan and back. More importantly, it could dive at nearly 500 miles per hour without shedding wings, a speed that would tear a Zero apart. The first combat patrol launched on June 21st. For P-47NS climbed north toward Kyushu, heavy and slow at sea level, the engines straining under their own weight. Captain Anderson led the flight, fighting the instinct to baby the aircraft. The Jug didn't want gentle hands. It wanted commitment. At 25,000 feet, everything changed. The turbo supercharger came alive, feeding the engine dense air the way Japanese fighters could only dream of. The Thunderbolt surged forward, suddenly comfortable, cruising at 300 miles per hour where enemy aircraft struggled just to stay aloft. Radar picked up Japanese fighters launching from Kanoya Airfield. More than 20. Probably hunting B-29s. Perfect. Anderson checked his fuel. Full. Checked his guns. Armed. Checked his wingman. Lieutenant Thompson, 19 years old, from Nebraska, on his 3rd combat mission. 2 months earlier he'd been finishing high school. Now he was about to learn whether training mattered. They spotted the Japanese formation 15 miles out, mostly Ki-84 Hayats with a few older Zeros mixed in, cruising at 20,000 feet in a loose formation. No high cover. For years into the war, and they still hadn't learned. Anderson pushed his flight higher. 33,000 feet. Below them, the Japanese pilots flew on, unaware. The dive began from the edge of the stratosphere. Anderson pushed the nose down and felt the Jug respond like a falling safe. The airspeed indicator climbed. 300. 400. 450. The aircraft remained rock solid. No vibration, no flutter, just controlled violence. The Japanese fighters filled his gun sight. 400 yards. 300. 200. He squeezed the trigger. 8 machine guns firing at once sounded like the sky ripping apart. All 8 streams converged at 300 yards, meeting at a single point in space. The lead Ki-84 didn't break up. It vanished. One moment it was a fighter. The next it was aluminum, confetti, and fire. Anderson blew through the formation at 400 miles per hour. The Japanese pilots scattered in confusion, trying to understand what had just happened. By the time they reacted, the P-47s were already 2,000 feet below, pulling out of the dive under crushing G-forces, engines howling, then climbing again, fast. Thompson scored 2. His target tried to turn away at the last second. It didn't matter. 8 guns put so much lead in the air that close enough was lethal. The Zero's wing tore free. The aircraft cartwheeled downward. The pilot never escaped. The Japanese were skilled. They had years of combat experience. But they had never fought anything like this. The Americans didn't dogfight. They hunted. High altitude. One pass. Maximum fire. Climb away. By the time the enemy tried to respond, the Thunderbolts were already ghosts above them. Lieutenant Yamamoto had 17 kills. He had fought P-40s in Burma, P-38s over Rabaul, Hellcats in the Philippines. He tried to climb after the Americans. At 25,000 feet, his engine struggled. At 30,000, it suffocated. Above him, the P-47s circled patiently, waiting. The second pass came 3 minutes later. The P-47s rolled inverted in unison, noses dropping toward the scattered Japanese formation. Lieutenant Yamamoto saw them this time. Silver shapes falling out of the sun like anvils, but knowing they were coming didn't help. He shouted into his radio, ordering his flight to brake left. Braking meant turning. Turning meant bleeding energy. And energy, at altitude, was life. The Thunderbolts opened fire at 400 yards. Another key, 84 detonated midair. A Zero lost an entire wing in a single burst. The American fighters blasted through the formation and climbed away again, untouched. Yamamoto tried something different. He dove hard for 15,000 feet, hoping to drag the Americans down where his fighters still had teeth. For a moment it worked. The P-47s followed, but not all the way. They stayed 5,000 feet above him, maintaining the advantage like predators pacing wounded prey. Every time Yamamoto tried to climb, the Americans dove. Every time he turned, they fired. Every time he thought he had an opening, they vanished upward again. It was like fighting gravity itself. After 12 minutes, 6 Japanese fighters were gone. The rest scattered low and fast, running for clouds and coastline. Anderson still had more than 2,000 rounds of ammunition. Fuel at 60%. Time to go home. Back at Ishima, the mechanic from Pittsburgh counted 2 holes in Anderson's tail section. Both were 7mm rounds. Desperate fire from a pilot who had known he was already dead. The bullets had punched through the skin and stopped. The Jug didn't care. Word spread fast. By the next day, 3 squadrons were requesting P-47Ns. Bomber crews loved them even more. B-29s flying from Okinawa needed escorts that could stay with them all the way to Japan and still fight. Mustangs could do it, barely. Thunderbolts did it with fuel to spare and ammunition to burn. July 2nd marked the first long-range escort mission. 16 P-47Ns accompanied 32 B-29s to Osaka. 7 hours round trip. Over Shikoku, Japanese fighters rose to meet them. Same result. The Thunderbolts climbed above, dived through, climbed away. One pilot from California described it later as SEAL clubbing. Not sporting, but they weren't there for sport. The maintenance chief from Detroit kept statistics like a bookkeeper. In 2 weeks, the P-47Ns flew 87 combat sorties. 31 Japanese aircraft destroyed. 1 Thunderbolt lost to ground fire during a strafing run. The pilot, a schoolteacher from Missouri, had tried to silence a flak position. A 25mm shell hit the engine. Even the Jug couldn't ignore that. He ditched 20 miles offshore and was rescued 6 hours later by a Navy flying boat. Captain Anderson refined the tactics. The Thunderbolt could not turn with Japanese fighters. It did not need to. Above 20,000 feet, it outclimbed them. At any altitude, it outdived them. At all ranges, it outgunned them. The rules were simple. Climb high. Pick your target. One pass. Get out. Never get slow. Never get low. Never turn. The kids fresh out of training wanted dogfights. Anderson broke that habit fast. Glory got you killed. Efficiency got you home. The Japanese adapted. They tried posting fighters at 30,000 feet. Their engines choked. Pilots struggled to stay conscious, sucking oxygen while the Americans maneuvered comfortably above them. They tried attacking from below. Climbing bled speed. Slow fighters died to 8 guns firing together. July 15th brought the largest engagement yet. 40 P-47Ns escorted 60 B-29s to Kobe. Japanese intelligence had warned of the raid. 70 fighters waited at staggered altitudes. It didn't matter. The Thunderbolts stayed with the bombers until the interceptors committed, then climbed above all of them. When the Japanese went for the bombers, the P-47s fell like sledgehammers. Lieutenant Thompson from Nebraska had figured something out. Japanese pilots almost always broke right when attacked from above. A training reflex drilled into them for years. So Thompson aimed left. He waited for the break and walked his fire through the turning aircraft. 3 seconds. 200 rounds. 1 fighter gone. Climb. Reset. Repeat. The killing became mechanical. That disturbed some pilots. Not Thompson. His older brother had died on Iwo Jima, shot by a sniper while dragging a wounded Marine to cover. Thompson had enlisted the next day, lying about his age. His mother signed the papers without a word. Now he was 19 years old, killing strangers at 30,000 feet. During a lull, circling above the bomber stream, he thought about the farm he and his brother had planned to buy. Horses, cattle, open land, a future that no longer existed. The Japanese fighters came again, 30 of them climbing from the southwest. The B-29s held 24,000 feet. The P-47s waited at 31. Anderson's voice was calm over the radio. Same as always, boys. 1 pass. Watch your 6. The dive never stopped being exhilarating. 5 tons of aircraft pointing straight down. The engine screaming. The airspeed needle rushing past 400. Thompson lined up a key, 61 Tony attacking a damaged bomber. The Japanese pilot never saw him. 8 guns fired at 300 yards. The Tony came apart like paper. Pull out. Climb. Grunt through the G-forces. At 20,000 feet, Thompson checked his ammo. Still 2,000 rounds left. But the Japanese were done. The survivors ran low into cloud cover. Without radar, pursuit was pointless. Mission complete. The mechanic from Pittsburgh was waiting when they landed, as always, already checking for damage before the pilots even climbed down. He'd seen plenty of shot-up airplanes in his life. The P-47Ns kept coming back clean. Almost boring. That night, Thompson wrote to his mother. Told her he was safe. Flying good equipment. Said the war would be over soon. He didn't tell her that pressing the trigger felt like nothing. That part scared him more than Japanese fighters ever had. August came fast. The missions continued even after the first atomic bomb fell. Hiroshima burned. Nobody knew what it meant yet. 2 days later, Nagasaki vanished. Still, the P-47s flew, because until someone said stop, war meant flying. On August 15th, the order finally came. Stand down. All aircraft grounded. Lieutenant Thompson felt nothing. No joy. No relief. Just a hollow quiet where adrenaline had lived for months. That night there was drinking, shouting, laughter that felt forced. The war world ended, and no one knew how to step back into the other one. The P-47Ns sat on the flight line, engines cooling, guns silent. 8 machine guns. 3,400 rounds. Perfected just in time to become obsolete. Thompson went home to Nebraska. Became a farmer. Never spoke about Japan. When planes passed overhead, he still looked up, counted engines, measured altitude. Captain Anderson became a judge. The mechanic from Pittsburgh ran a garage. The pilots scattered into normal life, carrying memories no one asked about. The Thunderbolt was scrapped, museumed, forgotten. But for a few months in 1945, it ruled the sky. Not with grace, not with beauty, but with altitude, armor, and overwhelming firepower. And the boys who flew it learned the hardest lesson of all. Winning a war doesn't mean the war lets go of you. It just gets quieter.